Today's training is for you if you are considering launching your very own yoga podcast, or if you've already launched your podcast and you want to know how to grow your listener numbers. You know, if you've been in this community for any amount of time, or if you're a student inside one of our programs, you'll know that I'm always saying you need to have your own yoga podcast. It's a free channel, and you know, if you are already creating content, why would you not add this into your content plan? So no matter what stage you're at, today I'm going to be sharing with you some organic growth strategies that we've used here at Digital Yoga Academy for the Yogipreneur Podcast to increase our listener numbers to over 100,000 listeners, and also to make sales in our online courses. So you might not automatically think of your podcast as a way to make sales, but ultimately it is, because when you are consistently in someone's ears over a period of time, you can create and nurture relationships, and you can create sales. Okay, so you know, your listeners may have discovered you through your podcast. Okay, so they may have gone into iTunes, into Apple Podcasts, and you know, maybe they've been searching for a particular podcast using the keywords that you are also using, and up you've popped and they found you. So it can be a really great or a really effective discovery tool. And certainly, you know, we have students inside students who have enrolled into Yogipreneur Launchpad, and also the Profitable Yoga Teacher, after learning about Digital Yoga Academy through the Yogipreneur Podcast. Okay, so it's incredible. Okay, and it's incredible because that channel is absolutely free. Okay, you know, I've been running this podcast now for the last 2.5 years, and the best part is that our podcasting strategy is actually part of our content repurposing strategy. Okay, so here you go, you've got an insider secret. What you're listening to right here, right now, is the audio from a live training that is currently happening right now on Instagram and Facebook. And this training, the audio, is what we use for the Yogipreneur Podcast. Okay, so we make a few minor edits and we add our jingles, the intro and the outro, and we upload it. Okay, super easy. So our first episodes actually went live in January 2020, and this episode right now is episode 132. Okay, so that's an episode more or less every single week, and within that 2.5 year period, we've notched up over 100,000 listeners. So that's on average just over 100 listeners a day, which is incredible, right? I think that's incredible. Now, I'm sure it's possible. In fact, I'm certain that it's possible that we could have reached that number, 100,000 listeners, a lot sooner. But the point is this: we don't do any extra, really, on top of what we're already doing. Just a little extra editing. I'm doing this training, this live training every week, okay? More or less. You know, when I'm on leave, like I have been, I've been on leave for the last 3 weeks, and high five and a shout out to my team who have been manning the fort, but we used audios from other trainings and interviews that we've done over the years. So one thing that we do really, really well here at Digital Yoga Academy is content repurposing. Okay, so there's a strategy and there's a plan behind it with all the pieces that link together, and it's a strategy that I teach inside our programs. And I hear time and time again from our community that the content that we share is incredible, okay, that there's tons of it. People actually ask me, they say, you know, Kelly, how do you manage to create all of this content? And the answer is repurposing, okay? So whilst I know, you know, that we could almost certainly have achieved 100,000 listeners much sooner, let's say, for instance, you know, our content strategy had focused on interviews. Okay, so many podcasts that you'll have listened to are interviews with guest experts that the host has invited onto the podcast. And if we'd have done that, if that had been our content strategy over the last 2.5 years, definitely our reach would have been greater. You know, our listener numbers would have been higher. But I am super happy and proud of where we are right now, right? This 100 listeners, this achievement, and so grateful to all of you guys, our listeners, for being part of that milestone. The thing is, I know that my business, Digital Yoga Academy, is here for the long term, and I don't need to rush anything. Okay, so quite often we want to do something and we want the results right now, but we don't need to rush if we're here for the long term. Okay, we're not building our businesses for the month of August. We're in August now. I've spent the last 5 years really focusing my energy on getting all of these foundational parts in place. Okay, on experimenting, with different offerings and learning. And when you do this, you take action and you really just build on the foundations that you've created. So my advice to you is to take action, like get started. It doesn't have to be perfect, because done is better than perfect, right? It gets you moving in the right direction. If you sit on the idea of your podcast forever, it's just going to stay as that, isn't it? It's just going to stay as an idea. And it might have stayed as an idea up until now because you don't think that you have the resources to make your podcast professional enough. So maybe you think, well, it's not going to be professional enough because I don't have the right equipment or the tools and whatnot. And, you might not have pressed ahead because you think you need all of these professional tools and software to create, edit, and share your podcast. And that's simply not the case. You can have quality audio and a professional sounding podcast without breaking the bank. All you need is a good microphone, and chances are you've already got that. Now, one way to make your podcast sound professional is to create an intro and an outro. Okay, so if you've listened to the Yogipreneur podcast, you will have heard that. We have our little jingle at the beginning and we have our little jingle at the end. And, you can script this yourself. You can record it yourself, and then you can choose some background music for it. So if you need support with this, you can get onto Fiverr, right? Get onto Fiverr, add a little job in there where you need to add some audio, add some music to your voiceover. And that's it. They can edit it super quick. It's not going to cost you loads of money. There's options out there to do that. So the tech side of things really shouldn't be the thing that holds back you progressing with your idea. Your podcast is not here to stay as an idea, guys, right? It's not here to stay as just an idea. And I know that that's not what you do, okay? As an entrepreneurial yoga teacher, which if you're watching this or if you're listening to this right now, that is you. Like, you have ideas and you act on them because you're here to make an impact with your community, which means you need to grow your community. And growing your community requires you to be visible, and it requires you to share content. And your podcast is a way for you to do that. It's a way for you to be visible, and it's a way for you to share content. Okay, so content only works when it's being created for a specific type of person with specific needs, interests, and challenges. So who is that person? Any ideas who that person is, guys? Who is that person? So anything you do when it comes to marketing and your messaging that you're putting out there should be focused on this person, and this person is your ideal student. Okay, so this is why it is so important to decide on a niche, okay, so that you can do the work to really identify who your ideal student is and the topics that they're interested in. Have you done this work? Do you know who your ideal student is? Because if you want to start a podcast and you're stuck because you don't know what the topics are going to be, or the episodes that you would record, what they would be on for your podcast, ask yourself the question, am I also struggling to create content elsewhere? Okay, so do you struggle to create social media content or to come up with topic ideas other than talking about the general benefits of yoga? And if the answer is yes, well, it's because you don't have a niche, okay? You don't know what the problem is that you solve. And everything you do to grow your yoga business starts here, okay? It starts with your ideal student and the problem that you solve and the solutions that you offer, okay? Only then will you have an abundance of topic ideas for your podcast. Right? Let's assume that you've done this work and you know who your ideal student is and you validated your ideas. Next, you need to decide what success looks like to you. What does it mean to you? So for instance, what is the goal of your podcast? Now, let's say that the goal is to monetize your podcast. So many, new podcasters, they have this idea that they're going to monetize their podcast. They're going to make money from ad income because they've got millions of listeners. If that is what your goal is, you're going to need a more aggressive means of marketing and growing your entire business in order to support the growth of your podcast. So have a think about your expectations around what success actually means to you. If the goal is more about providing a channel to create impact in the lives of the right people, i.e. your ideal student, and using that channel to lead those people to your business, then the actual amount of listeners that you need to reach in order to get that success is smaller. Okay, so this is certainly what success means for me. Okay, making an impact in the lives of my students is what success means to me. So, we receive countless emails and messages from teachers like you guys telling us that the Yogipreneur podcast has been a game changer. It's a must listen for yoga teachers who want to grow their business. That is success to me, right? Receiving that feedback, receiving those emails and messages is success. That's a measurement of success for me and for our business. So decide what success means to you. And once you've done that, you can then start to think about, what your content strategy is going to be and what the format of your podcast is going to be. So, as I already mentioned, we repurpose our content here at Digital Yoga Academy, and we use the audio from these live weekly trainings. And you could totally go down that route. Okay. Now, of course, this strategy, it requires you to already have a content strategy and to consistently be creating long-form educational content that you can repurpose. Okay, so if you're creating educational video content, you have a podcast. Like, it can be short and sweet, 5 to 10 minute trainings. It can be longer, 30-minute trainings. Or if you're doing interviews on Instagram with other experts in your space, again, those audios can become podcast episodes. Maybe you're already showing up live every week, doing a live training on Instagram or inside a Facebook group, or you're interviewing other experts in your space, but you've not really thought about what you can do with that audio. So you have a podcast right there if you're already creating that content. Or you can choose to make the podcast your main piece of long form content and then repurpose that for other channels. So the options are endless, right? The options are endless. Perhaps you want to go down the route of interviewing experts for your podcast. So that's going to require extra time, okay? It's going to require time for relationship building, okay, with your network, and reaching out to those potential guests to secure the interviews, and to organize those interviews. So this is an excellent strategy, like to interview people, because those people will potentially also share the podcast episode with their communities as well. Okay, but of course it takes extra time to do that, and you can't control whether or not they share it. Okay, you can encourage them, but you can't, that's the extent of it. So if you're choosing that as your format, if you want to, do interviews, then just think about how you're going to schedule that in. Okay. You'll have to plan weeks and months in advance, really, to coordinate all of that and to make sure you stay on track. So this is quite time consuming. And this is one of the main reasons why we've not adopted that strategy here at Digital Yoga Academy, because we have many other things going on. So for me, consistency is more important, and the repurposing content strategy that we use actually helps us to be consistent. So consistency, applies across everything you do, really, in order to actually get results. But this is one of the most important elements of growing your listeners for your podcast, is consistency. So just really have a think about, what you can realistically do with the time that you have available, right? We've created a very successful podcast from repurposed content. Okay. Now, I would love to do guest interviews, and definitely it's been something on my radar for some time, but I'll do it when we have more capacity. Okay. So you can do the same. Like, you can get started with your podcast using content that you already have, like repurposing that content, get it up and running, and then build on it and add to it in the future. So it's no reason to stay stuck, is it? If you're thinking, well, I want to have a guest interview, I want that to be my format, I don't have time to do that yet, so I'm just not going to get started. Like, you could be sitting with that excuse for a long, long time. Okay. I believe the best way is to reuse the content that you've got, get out there on lots of different channels so that you can reach new people, get moving, get it up and running, and build on it as you go. Once you've decided on your strategy and you go ahead and launch your podcast, I encourage you, and I really recommend that you start your podcast, you launch it with more than one episode. Okay, so just think about Netflix. And, people who watch Netflix, they tend to binge watch episodes. And the same really is true for podcasts. So if you just start with one episode and someone listens to that, but they really like it and they want more, and there's nothing else there for them to consume, they may leave and never return. Okay, so it's really best to launch with at least 3 episodes, or maybe 5 if you can, so that people can, cherry pick the episode that they think is most relevant to them. So definitely start with at least 3. And, remember that if they listen to one and they go on to listen to another, that's just increasing your download numbers. So, you could get 3 downloads like out the gate if you've got 3 episodes there from one person, from one listener. And then from there, be consistent. Like, you've launched with multiple episodes. What next? You need a consistent schedule and you need to stick to it. Okay, so don't expect your listener numbers to grow if you're not consistent. And for those of you who are podcast listeners, like, if you go into, let's say you go into, Apple Podcasts, or you go into Spotify, and you find a new podcast that looks interesting, and you go and take a look at the episodes, you'll see this yourself. Like, far too many podcasts will release an episode whenever they feel like it. And, you'll scroll through and you'll see from the release dates that there's been gaps of like weeks or even months when nothing's been released. Don't do that. Do not do that. Pick a consistent schedule and then let your audience know to expect a new episode every week on a specific day, because that is what's going to help to build that habit with your listeners when they know that they can expect something new. Don't overthink these things. Okay, so what we've discussed so far, we've talked about your content strategy, we've talked about the format, we've talked about uploading multiple episodes, sticking to a schedule for consistency. Don't overthink these things. They're just decisions that you need to make. And everything that you do in your business is about that, isn't it? It's about making decisions, not sitting on them, but being okay with decisions not necessarily being right all the time, right? That's how you learn. So just be open to learning the lessons that you go. Like, that is how you move forward with everything in your business. Like, that's how you're going to make an impact. So we make decisions, we get our episodes up there, we launch, we tell our community that we now have this incredible podcast where they can listen to us on the go. And then we want to make sure that we have a schedule to promote each episode each week. Okay, so I really recommend that if you can, to have a weekly episode. And again, if you're doing a live training like this, you use the audio each week. Okay, so that makes it super easy, but make sure you've got some schedule for consistency. So to promote your podcast each week, you need some graphics. Okay, you're going to need some graphics that you can update each week with the title of the podcast, to add like a little audio clip to that image as well, and then share those images on social media, on stories as well. And you'll want to email your list. Okay, so you want to share it with your list, share the links to your latest podcast, and entice your subscribers. Like, tell them, what they're going to learn, and then link through to your show notes that sit on your website. Okay, so your show notes, if any of you have been on the if any of you have been on our Digital Yoga Academy website, we have a whole section for the podcast. And when you go through to that section, you'll see that each episode has its own page, and it has show notes which summarizes what the episode is about. There's a player, an audio player that's been embedded onto the page, so you can actually listen to the podcast on that page. And then there's links that go through to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all of the other podcast platforms. So those show notes are a very big part of your publishing and promoting, and they actually give your SEO a boost as well on your website. So basically, as I said, you're just summarizing everything. And when you promote your episode, so when you're promoting your episode on social media, and when you're telling your email list about your new episode, you actually want to be sending people to that page on your website, okay? Because that page, that space, is a space that you own. Okay, you own that. So you're not linking out to, Apple or Spotify. You're linking through to your website. That's really an important part of the whole promotional process. And another way to promote your podcast is through your network, okay? Especially if you've done an interview with someone. So if you've interviewed someone, you want to make it super easy for them to share the podcast. So I recommend that you create some images and you create some copy, and you share that with them, and you ask them to share. And as I said before, you can't force people to share, but you can ask them to share, and chances are they will want to do that. But the easier you make it for someone to share, the better, right? It's going to be easier for them. So promotion of your podcast is actually very easy. Like, if you have a weekly episode, then you have weekly social media posts, you have stories, you have an email, you have a weekly reach out to any guest experts that you've interviewed. Do the same every single week. Right? Do the same every week. Like, that's what makes this easy and doable and consistent. Like, if you get that consistency, it's going to make it a whole lot easier. Okay. So just have a plan, have a simple plan for how you're going to promote it and how you're going to share it with your email. The other key thing here is that this gives you something to share to your email list. Okay. So, side note here, and it's an important side note. If you are currently struggling to send an email every week because you think that you don't have something interesting to say, it's not because you don't have anything interesting to say. It's because you're not creating any long form content that's worth sharing. Do you have an email list and you're reluctant to send an email because you don't think you've got anything interesting to say to them? Like, if you were creating content, like if you were creating a weekly blog post, or you were doing a weekly live training like this, or you had a podcast, you would have something to share with them, with your list, every single week. Like, that would no longer be a problem. You wouldn't be struggling with that. You would have something that you can share with them. You simply summarize it and you link to your show notes on your website, or if it's a podcast, if it's a blog post you're sharing, or if it's, inviting them to come and join you for a live training. You have lots of options because you're creating long form content. I'm not talking about, a social media post. I'm talking about some educational content. If you're struggling to create content, guys, go back to what I said at the beginning. It's because you haven't done the niche work and you don't fully understand your ideal student. Like, you don't know what the topics are that they're interested in. You don't know, what their challenges are and what their needs are. So you need to do that work. Once you do that work, you'll never have problems or struggles with what to create content wise. Okay. If that's you, then I encourage you to join Yogipreneur Launchpad. Okay. This is a 16-week online program. It's going to give you the tools to discover your niche, refine your messaging, create marketing foundations in your business around content, social media, email marketing, building your network. All of the things that you need in order to build a thriving and profitable online yoga business that's going to serve your ideal students. So this program is being created for you. Like, don't delay on it. Go to yogipreneurlaunchpad.com. It's all there. Okay, so before we finish up today, guys, there's a couple of other promotional strategies that you can use to give your podcast a boost. And the first is super, super easy. And it's really to ask your listeners to subscribe. Okay. So this is where they're going to hit the subscribe button. And it's one of the easiest ways that they can support you in order to grow your show. Okay. But the problem is with this is that we forget to ask people. So if you have a podcast, or if you're about to launch one, schedule that in so that you don't forget to ask. Schedule in maybe some emails where you can maybe add it on, onto the PS at the bottom of the email, or some social media posts, or even going, face to camera on a story where you actually just say to people, hey, have you listened to my podcast? If you have, I would love for you to go and subscribe next time you're listening so that you get all of the, most recent episodes and you don't miss a thing. So make sure you do that. Schedule that in. And then another strategy is to run a contest. Okay, so this is something that we've actually been doing for the last month. So this may or may not be new to you, but you actually have a final chance to enter. Okay, so as I said, we've been celebrating reaching this milestone of 100,000 listeners of the Yogipreneur Podcast, which has been running now for the last 2.5 years. And this is episode 132, and we've had 105,000 listeners, okay, of the podcast. So super grateful to all of you who have listened to these episodes. And as part of that, as part of our celebration over the last few weeks, we're offering you a chance to win a coaching session with me. Okay, so to win that coaching session, all you have to do is leave your review of the podcast. So if you've been enjoying these sessions with me, so I would absolutely love to read your review and see you have a chance to win this private one-on-one session with me to discuss your business and to help to give you the steps to move your business forward. And we'll be announcing the winner next week. So if you're listening on the podcast, check out the show notes. The link is there. And there you go, guys. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really, really hope, if anything, this has inspired you to look at your content strategy, okay? To look at how you're creating content inside your business, how you're sharing that, and more importantly, how you're repurposing it to make it easy, okay? I'm all about making your business easy for you, and repurposing is the way to do that. If you don't know how to repurpose, as I said, come and join us inside Yogipreneur Launchpad, that 16-week program, and I'll teach you how to do that in your business, okay? Thank you for being here with me. Please consider how you can create a podcast for your business, because it really is an effective way and a free way to reach more students around the world. Okay, sending you so much love. I've been really happy to be back with you guys after a few weeks off, and I'll be back again next week. All right, lots of love. See you guys soon. Bye bye.